Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's 1Mby1M Strategy Roundtable for Entrepreneurs. 1Mby1M, as you know, is the first and only global virtual accelerator for technology startups. Our mission is to help 1 million entrepreneurs reach $1 million in annual revenue and beyond, build $1 trillion in global GDP and 10 million jobs. In support of this mission, we've been doing these free mentoring roundtables for many, many, many years. We started as an experiment back in the fall of 2008, and at that time, I was actually writing a column for Forbes, and my editor was Betsy Corcoran. That's how far back Betsy and I go, and today it's such a pleasure to have Betsy on the show here. This is the 512th session. We've had over 150,000 people participate in these sessions, literally from all over the world. I mean, we see people from Ghana, we see people from all over Asia, Africa, Latin America, everything. So it's been a real romp through the entrepreneurship ecosystem of the world, just sitting here at our homes, at our home offices, desks, and so forth. So it's been really fun. Now, every single recording of our sessions are available on the YouTube channel, 1M1M Roundtable. So this one's going to go there too. If you're trying to look at it or share, you will find it there. On Twitter, you'll find us at 1M1M and at Stromana. Either one would work, and we publish a lot of very interesting content there. Hashtag 1M1M is what you use to live tweet today. This is a roundtable, not a broadcast, so we want you to participate, and I know some of you will. So this is the audio bridge. I will put the slide up later. We are going to start today's show with a conversation with Betsy Corcoran, co-founder of EdSurge. As I said, Betsy was my editor at Forbes, and we spent, I think it was about 3 wonderful years interacting every week. I would make sure my article is on her desk every week. and the most fun we had, I think, was when the financial crisis hit at the end of 2008. I wrote a piece called Capitalism's Fundamental Flaw. And that piece was on the homepage of Forbes for a month, Forbes.com for a month. So, and one of the earlier pieces that I did with Betsy, right when I started writing for Forbes, was something about, I don't remember what exactly was the title, but it was something to do with the Indian outsourcing industry dying, or death of Indian outsourcing. Now I remember, death of Indian outsourcing. I have never received so much hate mail in my life. You know, I live a very, benign life. I kind of encourage entrepreneurs. What's so controversial about encouraging entrepreneurs, right? My goodness, that article was like, it had hit some nerve somewhere, and oh my God, woof. So that's how far we go back, and it's a real pleasure, Betsy, to have you on. I know you've done great things with EdSurge. I've watched from a distance. So let's actually introduce EdSurge a bit.
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much for having me here. I think I've been part of 1 or 2 other roundtables, and it's always a delight. It's been such an enormous pleasure to see how you've grown 1Mby1M, and the work that you started at Forbes is clearly living on and inspiring people all over the world, and that is incredibly exciting to see. I think you've always been also yourself a fantastic entrepreneur, because you're right, your articles always showed up on time, and well done. And the demands of being an entrepreneur are high. You have to show up every single day, and you have to be prepared. And so you are a wonderful exemplar in everything that you've done. You're right, Shamana, that I left Forbes in 2009. I spent a year learning about the education world, working as a volunteer IT person in the schools, getting under desks and counting computers and talking with educators. And what I learned at the time was that there was a huge disconnect in the way that technology was built and the needs of the schools. And you like numbers, so, here was the number that I was riveted by, which was that there was one IT person per 1,000 students on average in America. And that means that if you have desktop software that has to be updated one desktop at a time, you have an impossible problem. It is simply not going to work. And so what happened around 2010 was we had moved so much software into the cloud from a corporate point of view. Schools starting to move software into the cloud made an extraordinary difference. So I love to think about that as a great example of how when there's a fundamental shift, it opens up a new set of opportunities. Moving software into the cloud meant that one IT person per 1,000 students could actually now update, manage, and support software applications, and that made it workable in schools. So there were lots of other things that went on, but that was a fundamental part of the change. And so EdSurge, we started EdSurge to essentially be a sort of tech crunch of education. And the fundamental mission was to give voice to educators to help them explain and say over and over, here's what we need, because every great entrepreneur knows that you must listen to your customers, right? You say that all the time. I see it in your writing all the time, and it's probably the greatest truth and also the thing that's violated most egregiously sometimes by companies, which is you have to listen to the voice of your consumer. And so a big part of the mission of EdSurge was to amplify the voice of educators who are amazing people who are willing to put up with a lot of crap and so sometimes don't always say what is it that they need. And so EdSurge, we grew for, 8 or 9 years. At the end of last year, we were acquired by ISTE, which is the largest association of educators using technology on the planet. And I stayed with the organization for the first 6 months to kind of help with the transition. And then it was time for a break. And so I left ISTE, which I admire enormously. I'm really proud of the fact that EdSurge is a part of that organization. And the team has continued to do great work, continued to write, continued to support educators, and continued to try to expand on this mission of amplifying the voice of the users, the educators, and to try to explain how technology works and when it does and when it doesn't. So that's a little bit about EdSurge. And
So, Betsy, we have gone through a huge shift. The cloud computing shift is huge, clearly. We started, on our blog, we started the Thought Leaders in Cloud Computing series. I'm trying to remember whether it was 2007 or 2008, but it's been a long time. So, it's amazing nowadays, all these companies that are going public with multi-billion-dollar valuation, many of them have come through either our Entrepreneur Journey series or our, Incubation Radar series in 2010. We've seen these companies as fledgling companies, and I know many of these CEOs personally because of that. And it's really become a very robust trend. But alongside, there is this other major trend that happened also starting in 2007. I'm again remembering our time together at Forbes when the smartphone was introduced, right? That was like a watershed. And one of the applications, there are like a couple of applications that I use for learning during COVID. One of them I've been using for the last 4 years, but during COVID I've done it every day, which is Duolingo. I think it's an incredibly well-designed app, and I imagine there is a lot of that kind of great apps in the K-12 space as well. So could you talk a bit about the key trends besides cloud computing, besides the smartphone? If you double-click down into more of the EdTech space, what are you seeing? How do you synthesize these trends?
Sure. Well, of course, it doesn't take a soothsayer or a genius to see what the most important trend is right now, which is obviously been COVID. That has swamped every other factor, every other thing in our world. And so when I was thinking about this, I wanted to kind of identify a couple of different trends. And you have to start with COVID because there's absolutely no question. It has obviously created this incredible step up to hybrid learning. It has huge, huge implications for social emotional learning. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things you brought up in your essay later on. And it also has brought in a tremendous number of expenses to educators, to school systems that they had not anticipated. Nobody expected that they were going to be doing as much cleaning as we've all been doing this past year. So we do have to kind of observe that COVID has swamped virtually all the other trends that are going on. A secondary trend to that has been the economic downturn, which again has kind of been catalyzed by COVID. With that comes the work at home trend, the whole question of the role of parents in learning, and the fact that professional development is totally a train wreck right now, whether that's professional development for the educators or actually professional development for the parents, who are, in many instances, now a primary teacher for their students. So there's a whole collection of trends around the economic downturn. Third set of trends, again, not rocket science. The bitterness of the political world has been a big deal, and the role of the federal government going forward in education is really going to be interesting. And what we saw was during the Obama administration, there was a very big role for the federal government. The Trump administration swung that way over to the other side, basically kind of wiping its hands of pretty much anything except for some regulatory issues. The Biden administration, we have yet to see. We don't have a Secretary of Education appointment yet that's been made public. And so we will see what the implications of that are. There's also kind of a whole collection of sort of political trends that are really interesting. A footnote to that is we've had a lot of conversation about the role and the need for civic education. I think what we've seen is an incredible civic engagement by young people that transcends whether anybody wants to sit around and learn about how a bill becomes a law. So I think civic education is kind of a really interesting area and is changing radically. There are some obviously other really huge trends that are going on. The role of artificial intelligence is a very interesting and very complex trend. What we know is that we've always known that every product is based on a set of assumptions, right? When you build something, even if you're building a mousetrap, you're building it based on a set of assumptions about how the world works and about how things work. In a mousetrap, those assumptions are pretty obvious. Mouse likes cheese, perhaps, or likes food, and then the thing comes down and goes whack. Unfortunately, in software, the assumptions are not always obvious, and when you add in artificial intelligence, which is basically a way, as you, I'm sure, have talked about in great detail, a way of using algorithms to sort of drive forward sort of change, iteratively make change, the assumptions become murkier and murkier and murkier. So there's a whole interesting set of questions around what the role of artificial intelligence is, how much transparency we could or even can have around the assumptions and the implications that are built into that software, and what those implications are for learning. So there's a whole set of trends around that. So, those are really big things. We have had a cataclysmic change in our world. I, for one, expect that the implications of COVID are going to be with us for generations. There is no school on the planet that wants to be caught flat-footed again. We should and will expect to see viruses and pandemics as a part of the landscape of our world going forward. And that means that schools are going to have to plan what's going to happen if we have to do a shutdown again in the future. All of those things suggest to me that hybrid learning is absolutely essential and will continue in some degree going forward. And we don't have the tools to do that very well right now. So we have no lack of trends right now. And
this is actually a perfect segue into my next question. What is not working? In COVID, obviously there's been a much bigger, much faster shift into online learning and learning from home, like massive scale learning from home that the world was not quite prepared for, perhaps. Even the bandwidth was not there in a lot of cases, and especially amidst poverty, there's not enough of an atmosphere, both technical infrastructure as well as just pure peace and quiet, to do that kind of learning at home. What else is not working from your vantage point?
Sure. So, number one, the social components are really complex and are not necessarily working right now. We had developed over, generations, whatever, millennia, a set of expectations about what happens when we're physically together and how we interact. And all of those rules, all of those instincts are rendered mute or rendered different when we go online. I've talked to students who, have had both experiences. Some feel more empowered by being online. They can engage more. Some feel absolutely overwhelmed. English language learners have pointed out to me that they don't always know which language they should be typing in. And that's complex. Should they be, I talked to one girl who said, hey, I've got 3 keyboards in my life. I've got an English keyboard, I've got a Farsi keyboard, I've got, I think, a French keyboard. Which language am I supposed to be communicating in when I talk to my friends, when I talk to my teacher, when I'm talking in this environment? Because in her real life, she would probably speak with her friends in Farsi, and she'd speak to her teacher in English, and then at other times she would use French. And, she wasn't even sure which language she should be using at what point in time and which keyboard she should be using. And so that meant that her ability to react was actually significantly slowed down. We haven't figured out any of those kinds of interactions. For a huge, huge portion of students, the classroom has been a safe place. It's been a place where they are physically safe. It's been a place where they are fed. It's been a place where in some instances they can get personal hygiene, clothing, a lot of protective elements of their life. It's been a place where they've felt valued. Now, that may not be the case, as you've rightly pointed out. Not everybody has a beautiful home where they can sit quietly at a desk and, focus on a keyboard and a screen. Lots of families are sharing computers, are sharing tables. They've got multiple things going on at the same time. So we have not figured out any of those kinds of things in online working. Second area has to do with, are we learning? What are we learning? So for better or for worse, we have a collection of measures of achievement in, again, the plain old-fashioned world. We make people take tests, and we assign some value to those outcomes. Well, what does testing look like in an online environment? What's the measure between, testing for knowledge and testing for competency? How are we demonstrating that? None of those things do we really have a very good handle on. And then a third area would be the interaction of the parents. I've talked to a lot of teachers who say, I realize that I'm not just teaching the kids, I'm teaching mom or dad or an uncle or grandma or something like that. Teachers know that just outside the boundaries of that screen, there may be other people lurking. And sometimes they're sharing answers. Sometimes they're speaking in other languages. There's all kinds of things that are going on in the periphery. We have no idea of who is participating in this education experience and how do we include them? Why would we leave them out? When we work in a company, we learn to work in community. We have to work in community. This has changed our idea of learning in community in a pretty profound way, and we haven't built up any set of ideas around what that means. So all of that is not to critique the amazing work that educators, families, kids have been doing. They've been incredible. And the fact that we've learned, even half of what people have learned over the last 6 months is a testament to the spirit, the energy, the determination of educators, parents, students, all across the board. So please don't take anything that I'm saying as a critique. But do we have a lot to learn? Oh, yeah.
Well, it's an anthropological moment in the history of the human civilization. So it's going to be a year of slow learning. Well, you know what? It is an anthropological moment. Get used to it.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, switching gears, we do this Thought Leaders in Online Education, Thought Leaders in EdTech series as well. And that also we've been doing for a long time. We've tried to cover as much of the trends as possible. So from what you've done it at a much bigger scale because your focus is just education, what are the most interesting EdTech startups on your radar at this point, and why do you consider them to be the most significant and important?
So I'll give you a couple of different areas that I'm really intrigued with, and I can't tell you that these are going to be the companies that will win or sort of become, I hate the word unicorns, but, whatever. But I think that they're interesting and important. So number one is infrastructure, right? We're currently having this conversation on a WebEx platform. From WebEx gave birth to Zoom, of course. We all know that story of how Eric took what he learned at Cisco and moved on. I would argue that there's an opportunity to build a new set of platforms that, once again, speak better to the needs of the people who are using them. Zoom wasn't built for learning, wasn't built for education, was built for meetings. And a certain way that we have historically done meetings. It assumed that many meetings were still in person and that we could simply extrapolate from the in-person meetings to online meetings. I think that we're at a stage that's, and Shramana, you'll appreciate it, hopefully, because I'm dating myself and you won't mind too much, but if you think about where we were in, say, around 1993 with web browsers, there were at least a dozen companies of which, originally Mozilla became Netscape, became, one of the most crucial and important ones. But there were like a dozen different companies that were all coming up with versions of a web browser. I think that we are potentially at a comparable stage. Zoom or WebEx, Made, or Microsoft Teams are all big players, but we're starting to see a group of newcomers, including groups like Engagely, which is started by some of the folks who are involved with Coursera. And there's also Zoom EDU, which has nothing to do with Zoom, or I think it's called Education EDU. I get a little confused by it, but Michael Chasen, one of the founders of Blackboard. We're going to see the evolution of new ways of doing this online collaboration, and I think we're only at the beginning of that. So I expect to see a lot going on in the infrastructure stage. Secondly, upskilling. There is no question about the need for everyone to continue learning. Duolingo has been a wonderful example of language learning, a specific thing, but we're seeing a tremendous amount of work around how do we help learners make that transition to the other things I need to learn in my life. Guild, OnRamp, Little Company, Career Karma, all of these folks are aimed at trying to help people figure out how do you go from where you are to where you want to go next. And I think the upskilling and the or sort of adult learning category has got a tremendous amount of growth and a tremendous amount of opportunity for it. A third area is I love some of the things that we're seeing that bring joy and fun to us. We've started to see a few, you know, some of them are really silly, right? And they're outside education, but they could become an indicator for things going forward. Mystery games. We do want to figure out ways to have fun kind of collectively, things that don't necessarily involve whacking, you know, little things over the head. But some of the mystery games and things like Sketchy are really intriguing. How do you kind of inject a sense of fun into what's going on? And then finally, I think that this moment of all moments is a huge, huge opportunity for international entrepreneurs. We're going to see a tremendous number of people really building for their own markets. It could be everything from all of the categories that we talked about. SoloLearn is kind of a great example of a company in Europe that's been doing coding, you know, boot camps and coding camps. We're seeing a lot of those things come up. And so I think that the opportunities for international entrepreneurs are really huge.
So you touched upon this a little bit. So in COVID, one of the very disturbing trends has been a lot of teachers have been compelled to come back into class, and a lot of older teachers have retired as a result of that because they don't feel safe going in to teach. How do you parse this thing? I mean, on the one hand, having younger teachers is going to accelerate the adoption of technology, no question, just because they are digital natives and they're going to be more comfortable in a technology-driven universe. But it is also taking out a wealth of wisdom out of the system. And then also there's like all these people who were nowhere near retirement, ready to retire. What are they going to do with their potentially immense skill in teaching?
Well, we have been concerned about a shortage of teachers for the entire 10 years that I've been intimately involved in the education space. We've been both predicting and incredibly concerned about a huge shortfall of educators. So to some degree, you're correct, but to some degree, this has also been, you know, a perennial issue. I don't know whether it's a positive or a negative. I think that one of the things we've clearly seen is we've seen families of means create small pods and accelerate the quote what had been the homeschooling trend, accelerate that in a really, really interesting way, right? A lot of homeschoolers originally began homeschooling either for religious reasons or out of desperation or because kids had special needs, that sort of thing. They've now been joined by a big community of people who, quite frankly, have the means to hire tutors for small groups. So to some degree, there are going to be opportunities for educators to, quite frankly, be tutors to smaller groups. This is not necessarily a socially equitable or positive trend, so I'm not sort of cheering about it, but I'm saying it's a fact of life. there are going to be opportunities for teachers to teach small groups and small pods, and I think that there will be some segment of the population that figures out that they're going to keep doing that.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea in the sense also that while you say it's not equitable, but at least there's a large population of people who will potentially find employment through those tutoring opportunities. So, and that is important because there's so many segments of people that are, the older nurses are also going through the same experience. The retail workers are going through the same experience. There's a lot of people out there who need to be absorbed somehow into some sort of a work, gainful employment model.
Absolutely.
So, it's not all bad that it's happening. So, what are your thoughts about reskilling the unskilled sector? I think, I think my friend Gus Tai at Trinity Ventures. Well, he's retiring from Trinity. He and I have been talking quite a lot about, what has caused this hyperpolarized country and even the Trump phenomenon and so forth, and this the unskilled population that is really struggling to live with dignity. What are there technology startups or efforts that you see in the EdTech space for reskilling the unskilled sector? Because where we are going, on top of the COVID trend, if you layer on the AI trend, there's massive automation coming down the pipe, which I'm sure you've seen my immense body of writing on this topic. It's been a concern for me for years now. So we're going to, see a 1-2 punch there. And what's going to happen?
Well, as you said, you've written about this pretty extensively, and I don't claim to be an expert. I think that let's take a company like Guild, which is not exactly solving your issue, but is interesting and may offer some directional ideas, right? So what Guild does is it collaborates with employers such as Walmart or McDonald's or, groups that employ large numbers of folks who may or may not have great skills. And it offers those employees an opportunity to improve their skill sets. And sometimes they're improving their skill sets with the goal of getting a better job within their company. But the interesting thing is that Guild has convinced these employers that it's beneficial to offer learning opportunities, even if the result is those people then say, oh, now I can do X and I don't need to work for this company anymore, but I have another opportunity. That's really compelling and I think very powerful. Right now it works because it gets funded by those large companies, the Walmarts and McDonald's and, other organizations like that. Your question is, okay, well, what about folks who haven't even kind of made it to that sort of level of employer? How do they get those kinds of opportunities? And if I had that answer, I should be, Secretary of Labor, I think. But I think that we've got to continue to search for those opportunities. There is a huge role for government to help subsidize those opportunities for people who are currently underemployed, unemployed, without opportunity. But the critical thing is that it takes real work to design pathways that lead to authentic employment, right? And the challenge is to make sure that we're not just trying to educate people for the sake of feeling good about ourselves or feeling like, oh yeah, you're on a path, but then it becomes a path to nowhere. So there's a huge role for employment organizations, for coaching organizations, for folks who can really help be guides, true Sherpas in helping designate paths. As media, we also kind of, quite frankly, need to write more about the paths and the ways people are succeeding. one of the things that was compelling to me at EdSurge, and I know you do as well, is when you show people here's a path, then they can follow it, right? So at EdSurge, we had lots of people who said, oh, I was a teacher. I didn't know I could start an EdTech company until I read EdSurge and I saw all these people doing it. This is exactly what you do as well. You show people how to be entrepreneurs. Where are the groups that are showing people how they can build careers when they don't have those skill sets?
Yeah.
I don't know,
yeah.
but I think there's room for that as well.
The role model notion is a very powerful notion, which was at the heart of what I did with the 1Mby1M.
Exactly.
The concept inside in 1Mby1M is the concept of role model. So, Betsy, this is a philosophy question. We were, you know, I may have told you this. I started a literary group with a group of really great people, and some of them you probably know. So we've been doing this since 2016, and we do a project each month, and this is like heavy-duty stuff. We started with Dante's Inferno, and then, you know, Nabokov's Lolita, and this and that. And so one of the projects that we did this year, just recently, is Montaigne's essays. And one of his essays is about education. And on the education of children is the precise name of the essay. And his point is that there's only one thing you actually need to teach children, which is philosophy. And my observation is that that is the one thing that we don't teach children or adults in the world. Nobody teaches philosophy, and as a result, we get these extremely philosophically weak leaders, and I would put Mark Zuckerberg in that category, somebody who's wielding enormous power and has no capacity to think with, you know, fundamental philosophical concepts. So, any thoughts on this observation, or are you seeing anything like civic leaders emerging without any training in philosophy or any pedagogy in philosophy is kind of dangerous?
Wow. That's a really interesting question. I can't speak to the training Zuckerberg has or has not had in philosophy or so forth. So I'm going to counter with something slightly different, which I wouldn't do on anybody else's podcast other than yours, which is, with your permission, I would like to read a poem. I've been reading some poetry recently because I think poetry also helps you understand the world when it's very complex. I've got a very short poem. I did not write it, just to be 100% clear. It's written by a poet whose name is Brad Aaron Maudlin, and it's called What You Missed That Day You Were Absent, from the 4th grade. May I read it?
Yes.
Very short.
By all means.
Mrs. Nelson explained how to stand still and listen to the wind, how to find meaning in pumping gas, how peeling potatoes can be a form of prayer. She took questions on how not to feel lost in the dark. After lunch, she distributed worksheets that covered ways to remember your grandfather's voice. Then the class discussed falling asleep without feeling you had forgotten to do something else, something important, and how to believe the house you wake up in is your home. This prompted Mrs. Nelson to draw a chalkboard diagram detailing how to chant the Psalms during cigarette breaks and how not to squirm for sound when your own thoughts are all you hear. Also that you have enough. The English lesson was that I am is a complete sentence. And just before the afternoon bell, she made the math equation look easy, the one that proves that hundreds of questions and feeling cold and all those nights spent looking for whatever it was you lost and one person add up to something.
Beautiful. And it's so much in tune with my philosophy. I know why you read it.
Yes. So the short answer is there are many things we don't learn in school. All of those things in that poem are all the things we wish we learned in the 4th grade, but perhaps many of us take an entire lifetime to learn. we've got a lot to learn about what we're trying to learn and how we're trying to raise children.
Where we are, we live in this excess-ridden world of Silicon Valley where, people think their enormous billions are not enough and they can't find happiness and they have to basically create these orgies in Park City, Utah to feel whole. That's kind of sad. That's, one of the points that I've made in 1Mby1M repeatedly and for a long time is excess is not a requirement for success. And if you have mastered that, I think you have mastered life, more or less.
Well, I think that we all have a lot to learn. And I love that poem. I put it in the chat there to share with you. It's part of poetry readings that are a podcast called Poetry Unbound, which I have been enjoying enormously. And I think it's a good reminder that all of the things that we learn are not always the things that we measure, but sometimes the most important ones are, I love this line, how to realize that the home that you wake up in is your home. I think that's really profound.
It is really profound. We go to a lot of hotel kind of houses that are not homes.
Right.
Yeah. Great. So, folks, what we're going to do next, Betsy and I are going to work on quickly for a few minutes on an idea. One of the things we've been hearing throughout these last few months, well, at the beginning of COVID, everybody was shocked and nobody was thinking about anything other than fear. And then we very quickly, actually, remarkably quickly, the industry settled down to a new normal of working from home and kind of managing to do all the things that we did before online, because we are this heavily privileged segment that can work from home and pretty much be productive from home, and we all have very comfortable, spaces to work from. We're not the people who are facing the trauma of being squeezed in very small spaces. So very soon I also started seeing a lot of questions about new startups. People were taking the time that they had in their hands to start thinking about new startups. And we ran a poll and asked what kinds of content do you want, what kind of topics do you want us to discuss in our rendezvous and so forth. And the overwhelming poll winner was startup ideas. So I published a bunch of startup ideas, post-COVID startup ideas. Post-COVID is a discontinuity, right? It's one of the biggest discontinuities we've ever faced. And as a result, trends are opening up, new opportunities are going to open up. So I started writing my own thoughts about startup ideas, and here's one, startup ideas for the post-COVID world, K-12 education. Betsy has hinted at some of these issues. I'll read you my thoughts, and then we will brainstorm a little bit about it, and I'll ask Betsy to weigh in on what her observations are. So in the spring of 2020, parents of young children have suddenly woken up to a world where kids have to be homeschooled. They're supposedly guided by teachers. These teachers have no experience of teaching online and are thus learners themselves of a new education paradigm. They're scrambling to make things flow without losing the limited attention of the youngsters that are already difficult to command in normal times. The key issue I observe is that the teaching tools are not designed for this usage model. The education world has made a shift in the last decade from a sage-on-stage model to a guide-on-side model. In the former, teachers lectured to students in an auditorium format. In the latter, kids were assigned YouTube or Khan Academy videos as homework, and they did exercises in class with the teacher assisting as needed. Now we're making another giant paradigm shift in an accelerated pace. Kids are at home. Teachers are at home. Parents are at home. The learning is happening at home and the teacher is a virtual presence. As in most paradigm shifts, the best way to consider them is by looking at the opportunities they present. Throughout the COVID quarantine, I have preserved a daily routine of studying French on Duolingo. There is much that I've observed in their approach that can be applied to other types of subjects at various levels. For K through 12, the most interesting of these is gamification. Children tend to hang out in groups. One of the key success factors of K through 12 gamification could be to tap into this natural tendency and turn these organic affinities into study groups with built-in gamification. Let us think through a use case. Say a group of 6 kids are fast friends in a particular class. The most natural study group to form would be to let this group come together. In Algebra 1, the strongest of the group is tasked with tutoring the weakest, and the other 4 average ones simply collaborate. In a class of 30, there could be 5 such groups competing with one another in a tournament style. Math tournaments have been known to be great fun. What if there's an app that is equipped to provide all of the above functionalities? Peer tutoring, peer collaboration, team prep, class tournament. The other opportunity in this new paradigm is to make parents a part of the learning process and give them tools with which to engage. Of course, this needs to take into account that parents come from various backgrounds and educational levels. Again, let us think through a use case. Continuing with the same example, what if the parents of the kids were part of the process of getting these teams ready to compete? What can they do to help the kids practice and improve? I'm sure that tremendous amounts of creativity can be injected into building playful models of collaboration and competition that makes learning fun and engaging for these kids. Some of these models have already been explored. Others would need to be. In summary, remote learning and teacher-assisted homeschooling would need to become part of routine K-12 pedagogy going forward. The pandemic will end one day, but some of these paradigms may last if these experiments become successful. I'm particularly keen to see the impact of engineering organic friendships into study groups. Similarly, I'm keen to see what deliberate parent involvement does to learning outcomes. Beyond the product design, we also need to consider the go-to-market strategy for such products. Today, it is generally understood amongst EdTech investors that the best kinds of businesses are those that find viral adoption via online teacher communities. Teachers are highly engaged, influential members of the K-12 ecosystem. They drive adoption of new technologies decisively. They make parents and schools pay for new technology. They exchange notes with other teachers and are highly influential viral spreaders of new products. So rather than selling school by school, the most successful products find their champions in communities of teachers. What about the numbers? Let us say an Algebra 1 app led by the teachers in charge finds adoption in 1,000 classrooms of 30 students each. That's 30,000 units, say at $10 per install. If the product succeeds, these 1,000 teachers would virally get it to 10,000, which puts the revenue at $3 million from the app. Once the product takes hold in a classroom, it would likely be used year after year. There are about 3 million students per year who are in the target market, so the TAM for the app is 30 million ARR. Now, once the paradigm has been established as successful, all other relevant math subjects would fit into the same framework. With 10 such apps, we're looking at a TAM of 300 million. With 100 such apps that go beyond math and traverse middle school and high school, we're looking at a 3 billion TAM for the US alone. Thus, this is a unicorn idea that can attract venture capital. However, you need to establish with one app the validity and the success of a methodology, of a new methodology. And before you can raise serious money, you need to show that teachers are willing to get behind it. So some level of bootstrapping would be required before you can raise financing. Nonetheless, in the post-COVID world, a new learning paradigm needs to emerge. If you come up with such a paradigm, you can build a kick-ass EdTech company for the post-COVID world. Let's see, what do you think?
So there's so much good in your proposal, and so let me start with the things that I really love and like, and then I'll raise a couple of questions that I think are maybe relevant. As you could tell from the previous conversation, number one, I absolutely agree with you that we haven't built technologies that really are about supporting collaboration. And I've always felt that unless learning is fun and joyful, you really don't get much out of it. So I love the core concept, which is how do we find a way to support groups? How do we find a way to sort of naturally bring fun into the learning opportunities? And so your core approach I love. As a footnote, I'd love to point out that Duolingo, I'd love to point out Discord. So you're probably familiar with Discord. It's sort of like a mashup of Zoom plus Slack for the gaming world, where students naturally go and really spend a lot of time. And they collaborate, they build projects together. I think it's a really good example for what we could see going forward. So your core prospect, I think, is incredibly valuable. I'm going to raise two questions that I think are at the on some of the other elements. Number one is, where should you try to spur adoption of said product? Right now, teachers are totally overwhelmed, number one. Number two is and their schools are grappling with a lot of the privacy issues that are inherent when everybody just sort of is jumping online and so forth. So yes, in a perfect world, teachers should be the ones who are really adopting and championing this. But as you pointed out, parents have a big role as well. Mm-hmm. I think that we're going to see viral adoption by families of some technologies that then may work their way into schools. So rather than starting with the teachers, who quite frankly have way more on their plates than any human being should have, I would really rather see a go-to-market strategy that involves how do you naturally get students and their parents really engaged in something. So I would argue for that. Second thing is on the cost. Frankly, $10 per install is way too expensive. Remember that if you're talking about an individual app for something like algebra, a school is simply not going to have the funding to be able to buy a $10 app for algebra, for English, for history, for social studies. It's way too expensive. Quite frankly, it's almost an order of magnitude too expensive. So think about what would it take if your initial, essentially revenue was almost $1 a person. And then how do you kind of build up from there? The $10 is frankly more than the schools are going to be able to afford. So on the other hand, you could argue that if what I said to you is, hey, this is about the parents, you're going to find that there's a group of parents who have the ability to pay. And so therefore, where you wind up in that dollar between $1 and $10 will depend on who your initial customers are, right, and therefore what their pocketbooks can support. So, so those are my two critiques of your otherwise, I think, very fine idea. And I, for one, would love to see some of these technologies emerge and would really expect to see them emerge in the coming years.
Well, the other point that I want to underscore is the notion of friendships. I had a group of 6 friends since I was 12 years old, I think, about 11 or 12 years old. And the first of these friends I actually met when I was 7 in 2nd grade, and then another one I met in 4th grade. So we all came together, the 6 of us, and several of these I'm still very close friends with. So I think the friendships you form at the very beginning of your life, and the early, really formative years, are very valuable. And I think this online world, instead of trying to operate in the broadcast mode where, you have to wear nice clothes, get photographs looking like a, poster of Vogue or something, and that's not the way to groom these children. The way to groom these children is to give them healthy ways of establishing healthy relationships that will last a lifetime. So that was part of my thinking in kind of designing a platform that not only teaches but also has a real social value creation,
Yeah. Well, again, I would recommend, if you have not spent any time on Discord, I would highly recommend that anyone who's thinking of going into this world spend some time on Discord. It's a pretty interesting case study of a company. It actually was started, I think, around 2010, 2011. It's growing very, very rapidly, and it, again, was its initial intended use case, and its primary use case is to serve the gaming community, the online gaming community. But quite frankly, in our family, we have now 2 boys who are located in geographically different places. That's the platform that we use to chat with them every Sunday. And so, interesting combination of, as I said, I think of it as a mashup between Slack and Zoom, but a lot more fun, and it's certainly an environment that a lot of young people are pretty riveted by.
Very good. So both to you, Betsy, and to the audience, I want to also give you a pointer to another of these post-COVID startup ideas that also deals with the same kind of, small group friendships. We have one around called Meaningful Friendships through literature and film. Take a look at that. It's a really fun idea, and we've had a discussion last week at the Roundtable with a panel on that topic. Okay, well, Betsy, it was great catching up. I would like to catch up offline, one-on-one to learn what you're doing next. So I'm not asking you that on camera, but I will ask you that in person.
Okay. We'll save that for an in-person conversation, which I will very much look forward to. Thank you so much again. So impressed with everything that you've done with this group, and so impressed with, really the way that you lead, the role model that you create, and then obviously all of the great information that you're sharing.
And likewise, I'm very impressed with what you've done with EdSurge. It was a great post-Forbes move to do something really meaningful. I know you were looking for that kind of meaning, so congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Okay. Bye-bye. Tim Connolly, you are up next. Tim, you wanted to chat. So,
good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Very good. I appreciate the chance to be able to meet you. And my co-founder, Maura Sparks, is also online. She is not a panelist. Is she able to talk also?
Just dial in. Yeah, absolutely. 1 second.
She is a participant, but not. But anyway, she told me she is.
Here,
she's online.
Give you the dial-in number here. You can dial in. Maura. You can just dial in and be on the.
Yeah, she would be able to see that because she is watching it, and we're new to your organization. One of my relatives from your town, Menlo Park, has told me she knows you. Ariana is her name. She's a venture capitalist.
What's the last name?
Kwame is her last name. I just wrote her. Well, you don't know too much about our startup, but what should we say, or what do you want to have me bring up?
Well, you said in your email to me on LinkedIn that you would like to join the program, so I gave you the contact of Irina Patterson. In fact, let me actually give you Irina's contacts right here.
You're right. Well, we have spoken to Irina, just yesterday, and we're planning to present. We'd like to do a pitch in 1 week.
Okay, perfect.
We will. We got the guidelines, that looks good. We're used to having more than 10 slides, and so we have to work on getting our deck down to 10 slides, or less than 10, right? We would be happy to do that, and
well, consider the meeting next week. This, it's a roundtable meeting. You're going to present. I will dialogue with you, and I'll learn about what you're doing and give you my thoughts. But consider that just the beginning. If you decide to join the program, I'm going to talk about the program in a moment. So if you have questions about the program from me, you can hold those for a moment so that I finish this.
Sure.
But in general, once you're in the program, we get to meet over WebEx every week. So you can use as many slides as you want. You probably will need to break it down into different areas of discussion. One week we may be discussing positioning, another week we may be discussing go-to-market strategy, etc. So let me explain how 1 million by 1 million works. I imagine Irina has already told you, and you've looked at the website, but
sure. We are just becoming more familiar, but go ahead. I'd like to hear highlights, and we have an overview. We're familiar with other accelerators. We graduated from a 12-month cybersecurity accelerator in July.
Okay.
And that was quite intense. They had us up at 7 a.m. For 2 days a week, 7 a.m. And that was because we're working with a lot of other cohorts. There's about seven companies in that.
Our accelerator works very differently. It's very much you are your own boss. It's much more of a self-learning at your own pace kind of program. So let me explain how it goes, and then we will get to your questions. Folks, everything is at 1Mby1M.com. There is a blog that I strongly recommend if you are considering entrepreneurship or you are already a practicing entrepreneur. Follow the blog. You learn a lot from what we publish. And as we talked about with Betsy earlier about role models, you have a lot of role models that you can model your journeys after. So following the blog, following the Entrepreneur Journey series on the blog is very, very helpful. We also have books based on that material, 12 to 16 case studies per book. You can access them on Amazon. These roundtables happen every week, and every single recording is available on YouTube. The full acceleration program is 1M by1M Premium. We offer you extensive methodology guidance, a full digital curriculum. We help you with business development. Our entire Rolodex is available to the premium members. So if you're trying to reach people, potential customers, channel partners, we will introduce you as long as they're in our Rolodex. In some cases, we actually, if you're trying to reach somebody but they're not responding to you, many people would respond to me. So I would send them an invite and then introduce you based on their acceptance of that. And then the strategy consulting happens in this kind of environment. It's all WebEx. And private roundtables, basically. And you could call it mentoring, you could call it coaching. I like to call it consulting because it's, it puts us more on equal footing. I have knowledge, you need that knowledge, and that's about it. And it's not a power relationship of any kind. And then financing, we have, this is a difference with other accelerators. We are not running our own funds. So we can have you in the program for as long as you want to be in the program. And, that could be years. And you could access the network, you could access the learning, you could access the consulting for as long as you want. Now, in terms of introducing you to our network of investors, we work with hundreds of investors. But in terms of introducing you to those investors, you will need to be ready to be introduced. So I have to work with you, get you to a point where you are ready, and then I will introduce you. In 1 half-hour slot, you could be introduced to 30 investors. But you have to get there. And then the other thing that we try to emphasize is investor-entrepreneur fit. You kind of have to work with our network of investors, understand their thesis based on interviews and stuff that we provide in our forum, and create a short list of where you think the investor-entrepreneur fit is. I will help you, shortlist those investors. I will give you suggestions, etc., and then we will have a list of investors that will identify together that may be good fits for your business, and then make those introductions. Just like you are looking for product market fit, you will absolutely have to achieve investor-entrepreneur fit to get a deal to happen, a funding deal to happen. The self-assessment is a very useful little tool. It's basically the due diligence questions that investors would ask you. We want you to ask these questions of yourselves and your own businesses so that you preempt being stumped, basically. You're prepared when you go in front of investors. And also it helps you with strategic planning. If you get stuck in any of those, you can do 1Mby1M basic, and that curriculum is available. Again, you do it at your own pace. There are hundreds of hours of curriculum. You learn a lot. So go to the website, dig around, look at what's in the premium program, what's in the basic program. There are lots of FAQs, video FAQs. The curriculum is described in detail. And then the philosophy of the program is very much case study based. We believe hugely in the role model concept, that you can, find blueprints and find, playbooks of what other people have done before and repeat those strategies. And then video lectures are part of the curriculum as well. Our methodology is lean, capital efficient, bootstrap startups. We follow a bootstrap first, raise money later philosophy. And that's it. We can go back to questions in just a moment. Our upcoming free roundtables, we have one more in December before the holidays. And then in January, we get back to weekly Thursday morning roundtables. So you're very welcome to come, share your business, and brainstorm. We also have these rendezvous on Tuesday mornings on LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, and Twitter Live. Those, we have 2 more left in December. And then we are ready for questions. If anybody has any other questions, please go ahead and ask if you would like to dial in. If you have questions about the program, you can contact Irina Patterson. Her email is irina@1Mby1M.com. And that is all we have in the program for today. Any questions, folks? Tim, Maura, any questions?
Yeah, hi, this is Maura Sparks. I'm the co-founder with Tim.
Yeah.
And I have a question. So it sounds like, I get it, it's self-directed, the program. Is there any interaction with any of the other, companies that might be also on your platform working on their own?
The roundtables are just like this. They are WebEx meetings, and there are multiple members on those calls.
Okay.
So it really depends on who's on the call and who's,
Because I asked because one of our one of, besides funding, we are also looking for, partners. And that's, not something that we're continually looking for, as well as.
Our philosophy on looking for partners is actually very strategic. It's not so much the water cooler type of partnerships. We look at your business, we work on your business together, and brainstorm about what is the right kind of partner that you're looking for.
Sure.
Then we go proactively, figure out who they are. I will guide you in all that, and then find what those companies are that you need to partner with, and then we make introductions to those companies. If they're already in our network, I will make their introductions right away. If not, I will go talk to them and bring. If you're not independently successful in touching base with them, I will introduce you to them by reaching out to them myself. So It's a very different way of partnership, thinking about partnerships. It's much more strategic. It's not random chance serendipity kind of things. It's much more strategic.
No, ours is, we're doing it strategically too. We have a plan. And just one of the things that happened with our company initially was, although, our plan is to release our platform first in the U.S., we were approached early on to do a partnership in Japan. So we do have that relationship going, and our goal is we meet with them, at least a couple times a month, and we strategize. They're doing market research on that area for our platform. And so our goal is to launch there in Japan and other countries in Southeast Asia shortly thereafter. So that's ongoing. And they did a small investment in our company. And so, it's a positive relationship.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Tim. It's about your investors. You have mentioned quite a few, hundreds. Can you say a little bit about what they look for in terms of size of investment and type of companies they like to invest in? I gather that that's kind of a broad question, but we're a fairly typical HR tech startup looking with a seed round of roughly $1 million seed round. That's where we are right now.
We have relationships across the spectrum of seed and Series A. We have relationships beyond that as well, but the ones that are relevant to the program mostly are in the pre-seed, seed, post-seed, pre-Series A, small Series A, large Series A. That's the spectrum where we see most of the activity in our program. So, we're going to have to look at where you are, what stage you are, what you have. If you go to the seed capital section of our blog, you will see investor interview after investor interview, and we have all that much better organized inside the curriculum. So once you're in the curriculum, you will get to see it in a more organized fashion. So we will, as I said, we will need to look for investor and entrepreneur fit within our broader pool of investors, and we will do that.
That's okay. Yeah, that's good to do that. We have a program a development program to get what we call an MVP light within about 1 month, and we want to get that launched as soon as possible. We've been held up or kind of stymied not having what people call an MVP.
Well, why don't we talk next week with your pitch so I get a bit more context? It's hard to talk in generalities. I prefer not to talk in generalities. I've given you the general framework of how we operate, and let's talk next week specifics.
Right, that makes sense. And let's see. I had a question about HR tech. There is some overlap with EdTech and HR tech. Training is important for employees. But our question is your familiarity and your program with the human resource area. Can you comment on that?
We have numerous case studies of HR tech. We've been covering companies like SuccessFactors, Taleo, Cornerstone On Demand, right from the beginning, Sava, and so on and so forth. I know the CEOs of those companies, founders of those companies. So, yes, I know that space very, very well.
That's encouraging, yeah. It's LinkedIn is the 800-pound gorilla.
Space, by the way.
Yes, we do notice that. We've studied apps run the world, data. It's a really good market research source. There are many HR tech companies. I'm well aware of them. Yeah.
Okay, well, very good. I think we've come to the end of the program today. Folks, thank you for coming.
Sure.
I hope you're all staying through the holidays. And
thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
I will see you next week. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye. Bye, madam.
Great weekend. Take care.
Take care.